Hello, welcome to the session on migrating to Oracle Autonomous Database from AWS, Azure, and Google. In this session, we'll discuss strategies for migrating data to Oracle Autonomous Database from non-Oracle databases running in other clouds. I am Prakash Nadori from Platform Migrations Group at Oracle. We will briefly touch upon why Oracle and go over the reasons for migrating to an Oracle Autonomous Database. Also on our agenda today is to look at some of Oracle offerings for migrations and how we can support customers in this effort. Later, we will go over a typical migration process and data migration strategies. Why Oracle? Because Oracle Autonomous Database supports a wide range of workloads, be it data warehousing, transaction processing, JSON databases. Uh, the driver for migrating to an Oracle Autonomous Database is to move from specialized databases for different types of workloads that we see in the market today. Especially, we find a lot of cloud data warehouses, OLTP databases, document data stores. Uh, so, Oracle Autonomous Database eliminates the need for specialized databases and consolidates the data platform for customers, and at the same time providing performance, scalability, and cost reduction. Autonomous databases also uh, reduce the DBA workload significantly by automating a lot of the regular tasks like provisioning, configuration management, tuning, updating the software, scaling the infrastructure automatically, and reducing errors, human errors in managing the environments. Going to the migration process, a typical migration process for any database migration involves at a high level three steps. The first step is to analyze and prepare for the migration, uh, and that is done by basically assessing the changes in the target database that may be required in terms of changing SQLs or implement using different features functionalities in the database like encryption, partitioning, transaction management capabilities, SQL extensions. Evaluating migration tools and methods is also an important part of this step. And then finally creating a project plan for migration using the best practices available. The second step is to migrate the actual database schema data, all the objects in the database. That may include stored procedures, triggers, views, and of course, migration of applications, be it online, batch, or scripts. Finally, testing the converted applications with the converted schema and data is the important starting point for the next step. When it comes to deployment, preparing the production environment is, of course, the key. Sizing it properly, setting up security policies, creating backup and disaster recovery approaches and scripts and processes and tools is essential. Making sure that the latest data from the source is available before the switch over to the Oracle Autonomous Database is critical. How Oracle helps customers in migrating to Oracle Autonomous Database? First, by providing guidance on migrations in via the subject matter expertise at Oracle Database Product Management, uh, cloud engineering resources, pre-sales resources, and also documenting the migration process, the methodologies and tools that are available from Oracle to customers. And Oracle also offers a bunch of tools for schema migration, data migration, change data capture, and so on. So if you look at the tools, Oracle has SQL Developer, which is Oracle's premier development tool, as well as the migration features built into the tool, which is customers can simply download SQL Developer and start migrating. SQL Developer also helps in converting schema, data migration, application testing for some databases. Similarly, there is Oracle Data Integrator, the web version that can facilitate bulk data migration. Oracle Golden Gate can help with bulk data migration as well as change data capture for zero downtime switchovers to Oracle. Similarly, in the database console, the autonomous database console has interfaces for quickly loading data files, data from flat files into autonomous database. We also have Oracle database gateways that allow you to connect to non-Oracle databases and interact with them via SQL. Overall, looking at the data migration strategies, um, when it comes to a database migration, the data migration can be uh, categorized into two different forms. One is the bulk data migration and the other is the incremental data migration. Bulk data migration, typically we have to do it for the first at least once during the migration so that the entire database from the source can be copied over to Oracle. And incremental is for making sure that the target database is in sync with the source database while the migration is going on. So both of these are complementary to each other. In some cases, you may not need an incremental data load because the data volume is less, or there are not many changes on the source, so you can catch up to the source very quickly. But for mission critical applications and databases, that might be a necessity. In the bulk data migration category, again, there are two ways that you can move data from source to Oracle Autonomous. One is through flat files, and the other one is the online connectivity between source and Autonomous and moving data online without staging the data anywhere in files or other forms. And incremental data migration generally is done through log-based replication or event-based replication, and these methods are generally designed in a way to reduce the load on the source system while also extracting the changes from the source and replicating it to the target. So let's see data migration using files. In the first method, if you can see the graphic in the middle, basically it's a three-step process. In the first step, we unload the data from the source database using the source database's native utilities or commands, unload, copy commands to flat files, because the users can choose a size for flat file data so that data is chunked over on many files. We recommend that the file sizes be of a somewhat of a significant size, about 500 MB, a gigabyte at least. Creating too many small files may not be very productive from a performance standpoint. Similarly, choosing appropriate delimiters in the data file is very important. Large CSV files can be compressed. When we say flat files, they don't have to be just CSV files. We support many other formats: JSON, Parquet, Avro formats also. So file format will again depend on the type of data that is used in the source and the tools that we are going to use for loading. So once in the step one, the file data is unloaded into files. The files are then moved from non-Oracle Cloud Services to Oracle Object Store in the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and that movement can be based on regular commands like SCP if the file sizes are small and there is not much data, or we can use third-party tools that are available like rclone that can be used to copy files over from one cloud storage to another. And then once the files are available in the Oracle Object Store, the data from those files can be then loaded into the tables in Oracle Autonomous Database. And to load the data into tables, we basically have three different options. One is the Oracle PLSQL, there is DBMS Cloud Copy Data API, which can actually uh, load data from the files into the tables, and users can provide their own delimiters that they have used while unloading. They can specify whether the file is compressed or not, the file format, and all of those things. The second option is, which many Oracle users are already aware of, creating external tables on flat files. So in Oracle Autonomous Database, users can create external tables pointing to files that are stored in the object store and then consume that data into tables. So that is also available. And the third option is to, on an ad hoc basis, you can go into the database console and load data from there. In the console, there is facilities for registering the object store folders, and then we can specify which file will go into which table. So that facility is there. The next option for file based data movement is, we don't even need to move the files to Oracle Object Store from other cloud providers. So in this situation, you basically unload the files, unload the data into files on on the other cloud providers, and then Oracle Autonomous Database can read the files from other object stores directly into Autonomous Database tables. So here we avoid the movement of files between non-Oracle object stores and to Oracle object store. Again, the data loading itself into Autonomous will take the same route, which is the DBMS Cloud Copy Data, the external tables, the data load option in the database console. The difference here is a little bit in the configuration, where you would actually go in and set up a credential to access the files in the other cloud providers file storage service, and that way Oracle Autonomous Database can read the files, and then we will load it from there. And comparing this option to the previous option of moving the file into Autonomous database through the Oracle Object Store, main difference here is that because you're reading the files over the network, and so in a sense you are actually reading a lot of data over the network, and if you're going over the public internet, performance will not be great because of the multiple hops that you have to go through. So that may impact your data loading performance also. If you have lots of data in, tens of terabytes of that range, you are probably better off moving the files to Oracle Object Store first, and then try to load them into Oracle Autonomous, because then the files are local to Autonomous Database. So the network performance will not be much of an impact, and you can do different trials and things like that to check out which way you can load it better. The one other issue to one other issue is to make sure that the Oracle Autonomous Database CPUs are adequately allocated to support a large data load. If you are loading hundreds of terabytes, or 50 terabytes, 10 terabytes of data in a single table, and you want to parallelize the data load operation, make sure you have adequate number of CPUs allocated in the Autonomous to support that operation. Last, file movement section. If you really have like hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data, and you want to move the data into Autonomous, then we have an option called data transfer service in Oracle Cloud, where you could actually ship the files to Oracle Cloud Data Center. So in that process, the first step is that you unload the data into disks on your cloud on-premise data center, and then you load them onto the data transfer appliance that Oracle Cloud operations team will send it to you, and then you load up in the appliance and you send the appliance to Oracle Cloud operations team. What they do is, with that appliance, they will basically stage the files in Oracle Cloud for you to load it into wherever you want to load them into. So it's a it's a long drawn out process. It is not something that can be done in a day or two. So you have to be aware of that. And I would suggest that you talk to your account team and understand the process and the time it takes, and then go with that process. But this is ideally for really large data volume. This is not meant for few terabytes or things of that nature. We talked about the data migration using the database actions in the service console before. So it's a simple option where you can register a location of the file and just load it into an Oracle database table. You can specify the columns, you can specify the delimiters and all that stuff. This is ideal for developers who quickly want to consume a data file and build something out of it, or try some queries or something. So this is also possible. And again, this feature is, it performs the same task of data migration from flat files. Next up, we will the data migration using online network connections. So in this method, basically you are running a data migration tool, um, potentially in a VM in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and that tool will actually connect to Oracle and to the source database using ODBC, JDBC, or any other methods, or Python based. Um, and they will read data from the source and write it into Oracle. So in this method, basically you're not staging data anywhere. Data is flowing through the network pipe straight. This method is, of course, very useful, especially when you have really large number of tables and you don't want to deal with a lot of scripting, file processing. So you could look at this method as well. From Oracle perspective, you have ODI Web, which can be deployed in a VM from the marketplace, and then ODI Web can do the same thing. So you could use any other tool as well. It doesn't have to be Oracle. Whichever tool you're comfortable with, you can use it. Typical optimization techniques you will apply here is, the prefetch sizes, the batch writes, uh, concurrent processing, those kind of things to optimize the data load process. The next option in the data migration is using the Oracle database gateway, which I mentioned earlier. Oracle database gateway, like I said earlier, allows you to connect to a non-Oracle database and issue SQLs against them. And so that process can be used for data migration. In this scenario, basically, you would, because this is all cloud, you would deploy the database gateway in a VM in the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and then you will set up database links between the Oracle Autonomous Database and the source database. The and for to migrate the data in Autonomous Database, you would basically issue SQLs, like insert into a local table, select star from the remote database. So that is the process you follow here. Main thing here is you need to watch out for is any issues with certain data types, restriction, or you may have to run multiple sessions to speed up the data transfer process. Next step is, in the online data migration is, I alluded to this before. Oracle Data Integrator Web is a marketplace image that is available in Oracle Cloud Marketplace. It's basically an online tool, a web-based tool that allows you to connect to many data sources and also to Oracle. And with the help of few clicks, you should be able to migrate bunch of tables to Oracle the Autonomous. Supports many targets: SQL Server, Redshift, MySQL, MongoDB, Sybase, DB2, and so on. And it also has adapters for many applications. So all you do is set up the connections for source and target, and then you select the tables and go. It's pretty easy, pretty intuitive from that perspective. You should be able to download this marketplace image, instantiated Oracle Data Integrator Web. On to the data migration using Oracle Golden Gate. This is especially useful for change data capture, basically log-based replication. So Oracle Golden Gate allows you to synchronize databases by capturing changes from the source database uh, and replicating them to the target. Now, the way it captures changes from the source database is through a process called the capture process. In the capture process, as the name suggests, it captures the changes by reading the transaction logs of the source database. So that helps it capture all the changes, record it in trail files, and then it ships the trail files to the target for applying it. So in this case, the target is the Oracle Autonomous. The change data cap, it can be deployed in a situation where you want to keep all the Golden Gate processes in Oracle Cloud itself, meaning that the capture process is also sitting in Oracle Cloud and capturing changes remotely from the source database. Or you could actually divide it up and say that I want to deploy the Oracle Cloud, Oracle Golden Gates capture process in a third party cloud and then capture the changes there locally and then bring it back to Oracle Cloud for applying, which is the second option on the right. So either way, this will work. In addition to the change data capture, which we typically use for zero downtime switchovers and things like that in a database migration scenario, um, Golden Gate can also do bulk data migration in the same format. The only thing is there is a configuration switch that you have to turn on, and then it would basically capture all the data from the source and then copy it over to the Oracle database. Again, Oracle database Golden Gate images are available in Oracle Cloud and they can be set up easily there. I also have collected some live labs for you to look at to familiarize yourself with all these technologies that we talked about before. And you can set up your free tenancy in the Oracle Cloud and test drive these. And there are instructions and there are labs for you to follow. So this brings us to the end of the session today. If you have any more questions, feel free to email me, which is on my first page, prakash.noduri@oracle.com, and I will be happy to help you further. Thank you. Have a good day.